We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. You're listening to the Anoncast, the official podcast of Anonymous headquarters. Expect us.
Welcome back to the Anoncast, everyone. I'm your host, Alek Heidel. This week's show's a little bit different. A couple months ago, I interviewed Dark Justice on the show, and they asked if I'd be willing to speak with an independent journalist named Luke Jones, who was working with them on an independent documentary about Dark Justice and Anonymous. So I agreed to speak with him, and I thought we had a great conversation. I figured it'd be something that you guys would want to listen to. This conversation will be featured in Luke's upcoming documentary, which again we're going to promote here on the Anoncast. So here you go, ladies and gentlemen, me and Luke Jones talking about Anonymous.
Brilliant, right, okay, so thanks for chatting to me. So I'm just going to sort of dive straight in and just ask, why do you and other Anons believe that Anonymous should exist?
That's a good interesting question. I can really only speak for myself. My circumstances are quite different from most people who get involved with Anonymous. I was a cop for almost 10 years. I have a stack of degrees, all in law enforcement, public administration, all that stuff. And when I stopped being a cop, I was mad. I was mad as hell because I really had come to understand things that I saw going on around me in the news with police violence and all these killings that are going on. And I understand police work to a T. I understand it better than anyone I've personally ever spoken to about police work, with the exception of a couple of sergeants and lieutenants and whatnot. But I hear all this talk and debate about, or I did at the time, probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I was pissed off because I understood these problems that were going on with police. I still, to this day, the same problems persist. I understand them to a T. And so I got involved with Anonymous so I could kind of put across that information and help people to understand police and help police to understand people and try to kind of bridge the gap between the two. And that's my personal reason for getting involved. Right. Now, everyone has their own reason, and I really can't speak for anyone else, but that's my story and why I got involved.
No, that's interesting, because I suppose with a lot, especially in the mainstream media, there's a lot of this stereotype that there's a lot of members of Anonymous that are just this young teenager in a bedroom, and that's obviously not the case.
It's not the case, but it is the case. That's really where it starts. That's where it started for me. That's where I'm at right now in my bedroom recording this interview, you know. And that's a great place for it to start, in your home, researching, understanding, really coming to grips with what it is that we're trying to do. And that can be a really hard concept to wrap your head around. And it's a concept that I even struggle with at times.
Absolutely, because... Oh, no, sorry.
But that's one thing about Anonymous. It really is different for everybody. I kind of see it as like a blanket that's laid across, and that was laid across an activist community. And you had all these activists all over the world not connected. You know, they were on their own, or they had their own groups. And then once Anonymous came around, it was like, boom, we're all united as one. And that really, the building of a community is what I find to be the most special thing about it.
Yeah. So within Anonymous, is there some sort of leadership structure, or?
No, and that is its greatest strength. And let me explain. I work with Anonymous headquarters, anonhq.com. I'm a writer, and I do the podcast. We pride ourselves on being like the Anonymous media wing, you know, and that really goes to show how Anonymous has evolved over the years and has continued to evolve. Because you got to think Anonymous has been around for 15 years or so, 10 years in that area somewhere. I wrote an article on it. You'd think I'd know the exact date. But at first, you had people who were interested in causing mischief. And then you have Operation Chronology comes around, and then they organize together and they realize that they can really make a difference, you know, and that really was a turning point for Anonymous. But since then, look at what it has gone on to become. Anonymous headquarters has only been around a year and a half, since May of 2014. Wow. So more than a decade after Anonymous came about, this latest phase of the evolution of Anonymous arrived. And so I know my answers are kind of long, but the reality is, as Anonymous evolves, it grew a media wing. What other wings will it grow in the future, you know? Personally, I would like to see some Anons move on from Anonymous and take real political stances, form a political party, do those kinds of things. But those are all, in the years to come.
Right, yeah. So what would the view of, Anonymous be on other groups like Lizard Squad or like other hacking groups like Vandasec or something?
That's a hard question for me to answer, and I think I'm going to have to pass on that because that's not my area of expertise.
No, that's fine.
I'm not a hacker. I don't know shit about programming, and that goes back to this evolution of Anonymous, is that you have people getting involved who bring different things to the table. You have your protesters out in the streets. You have hackers organizing ops. You have Anon HQ putting out media for the Anonymous community and the world. And so, I'm sorry, I totally lost track of what your original question was. I have a tendency to go off on tangents at times.
That's great. So basically with Anon HQ, you are really, in a way, you're the voice of Anonymous, really, aren't you? Because obviously, understandably, a lot of members of Anonymous do avoid the media. So you are the voice, the representative of the Anonymous community.
Well, that seems as though the direction it is going. However, I need to emphasize the fact that you could take Anon HQ off the planet tomorrow and Anonymous still grows and still thrives. Being that there is no leadership, it is really up to people to take it upon themselves to decide what form of activity they would like to partake in, and then develop that. And that's what Anon HQ did, was they developed. And I say, it's funny when you talk about Anonymous, I don't know whether to say they or we. And I think that's just like another common caveat of participating in anonymous activities. But what I was saying was, really, it's up to the individual to pick an angle that he feels comfortable with, that he wants to do. Do you want to be a protester? Do you want to be a writer? Do you want to be a podcaster? We do the podcast now, the Anoncast. And I was really surprised that it was the only anonymous podcast out there. And it still is. And to me, that's extremely disappointing. I really would like to see a dozen anonymous podcasts. I want to go to iTunes top 10 podcasts and see 3 of them are anonymous podcasts. But it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what would you consider to be the most, this is potentially quite a tough question, the most significant operation that Anonymous has done so far?
Oh, without a doubt, it was Operation Chanology in 2008, where they took on the Church of Scientology. That was pivotal in so many ways because it put Anonymous on the map. It was the beginning of the end, really, for Scientology. And it was really the operation that showed that people around the world could unite for a cause under this banner of Anonymous. And so that's pretty much it. Chanology changed everything.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely, yeah. I mean, that was quite a significant one, and that's for you is definitely the most significant anonymous one. I mean, because I've been obviously I've been looking into things, and I think at the moment there's a lot of debate around Operation ISIS, and
yes, that's just the most recent, and it's in the news. It's been pretty successful from what I have read about it, but again, Anonymous being as decentralized as it is, operations go on all over the world that you and I probably never even hear about.
Yeah. And
with Op ISIS, I think it has caught a lot of media attention, and it's doing a great thing. But unfortunately, I don't have enough information on it to really comment.
Yeah, no, that's fine, because obviously there is the other side of the argument with Op ISIS that potentially maybe they're doing more harm than good if we're making it a bit more. I say I'm not part of Anonymous, but if Anonymous are making it maybe potentially more difficult to track these people if they're removing the Twitter accounts.
Well, that opens up a whole can of worms of a conversation. And without really going into ISIS themselves or ISIS's background or our current funding of ISIS, which still continues, whether or not the American government wants to admit that or not, whether or not it hinders their ability to track ISIS, I greatly question, because I don't believe that we have any intention on defeating ISIS, period.
Right.
They are the current embodiment of a ghost that we chased, 10 years ago. They're the modern day Al Qaeda, and Al Qaeda, we all know, was basically CIA trained Muslims who were recruited by Osama bin Laden. And what happens with Al Qaeda after 9/11 there's a lot of debate around. But with ISIS, I see that it's basically the same thing. We have no intention on really stopping ISIS, because then who do we have to fight?
So you think with not just the governments of the world's fight on ISIS, but do you think the anonymous fight on ISIS is something that's going to go on for a long time?
It's hard to say. With all operations are, to the best of my knowledge, fairly not compartmentalized, but they're basically, if you have a group of people going after one government, and let's just say that it's under one operation, that might just be one group doing that. Now, with ISIS and the ISIS operations, I really can't say whether or not they'll go on for long, because I really don't know if it's one group, one small group, or if it's multiple groups around the world doing it. And hopefully we'll never know.
Yeah, so because obviously with because that's the thing with I can't remember where I've lost my place. Yeah, so we were talking about like the ISIS and everything, and with everyone being like the different operations. I just wonder, so how does Anonymous actually choose a target and then progress from there? What is there a meeting, or you know?
Well, I can tell you that there are definitely meetings, obviously all online, and I'm not going to discuss the mode of communication, but I will say that with operations in the past, like let's take Operation Chinology for example. Scientology did something stupid, and it pissed off Anonymous. And at the time, that was back in the old days, the active group of Anonymous was very small, so it was very easy to coordinate, at least initially, from the initial members. Now, as far as today, I intentionally compartmentalize myself, and I don't participate in any ops, any planning. I don't access any of the Anonymous operation chat rooms, because I am seemingly and unfortunately the only real voice that's heard anywhere from Anonymous. I do this podcast, and so I have to put myself out there, and I have to take chances, and I have to risk myself being identified, and I don't want to contaminate anything that I'm doing by participating, by removing that compartmentalization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So, because another point is
because the reality is, I'm just a guy who writes and does a podcast, and I don't participate in any hacking or anything that could be misconstrued as illegal. And so, therefore, my own personal anonymity is important, but it's not nearly as important as to those who are participating in ops. So, therefore, to some degree, I'm kind of like the lightning rod, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. Do you have any contact personally with other Anonymous members who might be involved with the hacking and specific operations?
I'm just not going to comment on that at the moment.
All right, okay. So with Anonymous speaking, because what we say one of the main sort of ideologies of Anonymous is free speech.
Correct.
Yeah. So would it be fair for people to argue? I mean, I'm not saying I agree with him, and plus I'm in the UK, so it's a different country. But the ban Trump operation, could that potentially be seen to contradict the free speech ideology?
Yeah, it absolutely could. Personally, I don't think that Donald Trump is a target worth us dedicating efforts towards. Donald Trump is a sideshow, nothing more.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat your question one more time for me?
Yeah, just to say that with one of the main ideologies of Anonymous being free speech, does Operation Ban Trump potentially, because it's basically trying to ban Donald Trump, does that potentially go ahead and contradict free speech?
Yes, it does, to a degree. And to answer this question, really, the question becomes more of a philosophical question in general, because with any stance that people take, with any political philosophy that people take, you go so far to the left and you find yourself at the right. You know what I mean? You go too far in either direction, and you end up at the opposite of where you intended on being. Yeah. And that can happen very easily and accidentally. And I don't believe that is really the intention behind these Donald Trump operations. Yeah. What I believe the intent of the Donald Trump operations is to, well, you see, and even just in my explanation, I find myself leaning towards the fact that, yes, it is absolutely contradictory as far as freedom of speech goes. However, the content of which Donald Trump speaks is very much reminiscent of political hate speech that we heard some 60, 70 years ago now at this time. So I understand why it's happening. Personally, like I said, I just don't believe that it's worth our efforts. But hey, that's the great thing about Anonymous. If someone does, they can take up an operation on their own. And that's another thing about Anonymous, is that we all speak for ourselves, and we all of our actions are our own actions that we must take responsibility for. And we've seen Anonymous make mistakes in the past. So there can definitely be infighting at times. I remember with Darren Wilson, they what was it? Your Anon message, I believe, released the wrong name of the shooter in the Mike Brown case. So these things happen.
Yeah.
But as far,
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking.
I was just going to wrap up. So.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah.
Just to wrap up on the Donald Trump thing, it's not something I believe that people should take overly seriously. It's not one of our more serious operations. If anything, Donald Trump is bringing enough attention to himself that we're not needed on this fight. But like I said, that's just my opinion. I don't ever claim to speak for Anonymous because of how decentralized it is. And it is really dependent on the individual. And so I can really only speak for myself.
No, that's absolutely fair enough. So is there, within the Anonymous community, the whole network, is there a set of rules that you sort of have to abide by to an extent to be associated with Anonymous?
In a nutshell, I'm gonna say no. There's no charter. There's no Anonymous doctrine or rules. You really do have to take responsibility for your own actions. That's one of the only things that's really kind of put across if you're going to do something on behalf of Anonymous. If you screw up, you got to assume the responsibility on your own. Right.
Okay. So how would someone go about, say, if someone wanted to join Anonymous, how would they go about that? How would they prove themselves? How would they gain the trust? How would they do it?
Well, see, just the question itself is fundamentally flawed. And to explain, Anonymous is not an organization. There can be organizations within Anonymous, but Anonymous is really an idea. It is really nothing more than that. Now, there have become, obviously, and I don't even want to say it's a movement because it contains multiple movements. It can really be a hell of a thing to wrap your head around. And I've been working with Anonymous for almost 2 years now, and I still at times, like I said, battle with wrapping my head around on the concept of what it is, because there's never been anything like it. There'll probably never be anything like it again. And so that being said, Anonymous isn't something to join. It is a banner under which multiple ideologies and philosophies can be carried. Mm-hmm. One of the main and important principles of Anonymous really is freedom of speech, freedom from oppression. And if you look at targets of previous Anonymous operations, the people who and the organizations and the governments who are targeted are governments who infringe upon these freedoms. So to try to answer your question, you don't have to do anything to prove yourself. You don't even have to write an article like I chose to do, or you don't have to go out and protest like some people choose to do. You can be anonymous because of what you believe and what you think and basic philosophies that you go through life with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll explain when you have these million marches, all of the different people of all these different movements within Anonymous. That explains how you have so many, because they're all people who, in some degree, agree with Anonymous, the ideology.
Correct. And the fundamental ideology is just freedom, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. So I've seen online that there are Anonymous guides. I don't know how legitimate they are. Guides on how to hack. Are these potentially dangerous to have? Because if anyone can obviously get hold of that guide, and then if it falls into the wrong hands.
Well, again, if someone puts out a guide, the contents within that guide are their own responsibility. Again, you'll catch me going back and forth between we and they, but there's no Anonymous hacking school. And I'm going to be honest, I get emails from people who listen to the podcast asking for me to teach them how to hack, and I don't have anything to do with that. So, did I answer your question, or am I still getting there?
No, I think you're. Sorry, pardon me. Yeah, you're sort of there. It's just I was just interested to see because I don't know who's obviously pushing these guides out, and I suppose if anyone could access that and they could go and do something pretty bad.
Well, that's another downside. I mean, somebody could hack a bank or a government and then claim to be anonymous and not really, and that's one of the downsides, I guess you would say, of complete anonymity.
Yeah. So, would you say that Anonymous, as a network, as a community, wants to be feared?
Absolutely not. Well, see, as I say that, I think about people, individuals, societies, and the answer is definitely no. And then I think of governments, and I don't think governments fear anything. I think that their fear is incorporated into their calculations of everything they do. So I think to the government, we might be I don't know. It's hard to say. Are we an annoyance? Do they fear us? That I really can't answer.
No, it's worth it's one that's worth thinking about it because I suppose again you see there's lots of different groups within Anonymous and maybe some of them do want to be feared. Maybe not necessarily.
I would
by
agree
the
with
public.
that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because then you've got and I suppose Anonymous as a whole network would like to be feared by ISIS or the dangerous people, but then maybe there are groups that do thrive on being feared. Full stop.
Yes, I would agree with that. I can tell you that when the Operation Chanology video came out, that was spooky. That was scary. But was it scary like horror movie scary or, oh my God, they're going to come and get me scary? It wasn't really scary like that. It was more of an eerie overtone, so I don't believe their intent is to outright frighten people, but to let people know we are serious.
Yeah, I get that because I've seen a lot of the Anonymous videos, and they do have that feeling about them that is we're coming for you. We're not just messing around here. We are being deadly serious, and they do have that feeling about them. They're quite dramatic the way they're put together, and obviously with the mask, it all adds to it.
Yes, that doesn't hurt. The mask serves multiple purposes. It obviously is the anonymous symbol. When you see that mask, people think anonymous. So it functions to be a symbol, and it functions to hide the identities of individuals. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. So if I just go back to quite large operations that you do. So you've got your Operation ISIS or your Operation Chanology. How we've sort of touched on this already, but how is such a large operation sort of coordinated from the putting the media out, putting the press release out, to then actually coordinating it? I suppose it's because there's one group and they're always talking to each other? Or?
Well, there are distinct methods of communication that Anonymous use to coordinate these events. How people go about discovering these methods is really going to have to be up to them. But I can tell you with certainty that there are absolutely defined paths of communication for members within Anonymous, or for people who want to get involved with Anonymous.
Yes, because I know you're not going to go into too much detail, but obviously Anonymous exists mainly within the deep web, don't you?
Well, to some degree, that question is slightly outside of my purview. Right. However, I will state that the vast majority of people who want to get involved with Anonymous probably don't know anything about the deep web. So using the deep web is not a good tool to get people involved. That would be something that people could use once they are involved in an operation, perhaps. But communication amongst Anonymous does not necessarily have to, nor is most of it probably on the deep web.
All right, okay, yeah, because I work with journalists here who spent time in the deep web, and it is, especially if you go to the dark web, it's a pretty scary place. And I've looked at things that Anonymous have been involved with, like your Operation Darknet, Operation Death Eaters, which are actually quite serious topics. Obviously, it's around child abuse. And I think, in a way, that's actually a very worthy cause, because you are actually going out there and you're exposing and trying to put an end to these pretty disgusting people.
Yes. And you mentioned Dark Justice earlier. Yeah. Those guys are, you talked to Dark Justice, those guys are doing some awesome work.
They are.
awesome work. That's another great example of the evolution of anonymous, because Dark Justice aren't really anonymous in and of themselves, but they are technically anonymous. Nobody knows who they are. Well, we don't know who they are. The public doesn't. And they have their own organization that they have a specific goal that they work on. They go out there and they bust pedophiles. That is their thing. They could develop that into a huge operation or organization unto itself. See, so Anonymous has the ability to grow and evolve just based on the will of the people who want to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, even though Dark Justice aren't hackers, but obviously everything they do is based online, would they categorize themselves, potentially, could they categorize themselves, I should say, as part of Anonymous? I don't think they would, but could they if they wanted to take that route?
Yeah, they absolutely could. They absolutely could. And that's the great thing about Anonymous, or one of the great things, is that anybody can be anonymous.
Yeah, it's this huge ideology, and I mean, I've done a lot of research, and it welcomes anyone, which is a nice thing.
There's a great video that's on YouTube, and I love it, and I end up quoting it all the time. It's called The Final Resistance 2014. If you get a couple minutes when we get done with the interview, go and listen to it. And that video sums up Anonymous better than anything else I've ever heard or read or seen.
Right. That's called Final Resistance 2014.
Yes.
Yeah, I've just written that down. I'll give that a watch. Definitely. Thanks. So yeah, I just want to. I've got not many questions left. But again, thanks for your time.
Anytime.
Yeah. So I just want to sort of address it because I know that, again, groups within Anonymous have been known to leak security secrets and classified information. Why? Is that not potentially quite a dangerous thing? Because can the public handle this information, or can, if it falls into the wrong hands, is that not best kept classified?
Well, I think that kind of goes to what documents, the specific documents you would be referring to. I mean, are you referring to documents like the type that Edward Snowden leaked?
Yeah, along those lines. Just security information.
That's a double-edged sword, because you have information that's being withheld from people who should have that information, the American people, the world. So I don't ever worry about the argument of can the people handle it. To me, is that I don't worry about whether or not people can handle it. If they can't, then that's their own individual problem.
Right.
But as far as information falling into the wrong hands, that's hard to say. Have we had any history of leaked documents by Anonymous or anyone else in recent history that have fallen into the wrong hands and have led to anything? I really can't say that they have.
No,
so
that hasn't. But that's not to say it won't happen.
That's true. That's very true. But it's not to say it won't happen. But I would hate to live my life by what ifs, and so I can't say that I am against any kind of information dumps at all. I think they're all great.
Okay, so what if hypothetically in the say the UK, because I know more about like our structure in the UK. So say a group within Anonymous in the UK decided to, for whatever reason, leak passwords for the Ministry of Defence. That would surely not have any good results out of it. I don't know why they would. I'm not suggesting they would do that.
Right. No, you're absolutely correct. There's certain information that, if fell into the wrong hands, could possibly be dangerous. But that's a lot of what ifs and could be's and speculation. And of course, I could envision a situation where that would happen. I just don't think it's very likely.
No, that's fair enough. Like I say, I didn't want to suggest that people in Anonymous would do that, but it's something that was on my mind, saying, what.
Oh, but I have no doubts that there are people out there who claim to be anonymous who would do things like that. I have no doubts at all.
Yeah, and
but I guess it goes with the territory.
Yeah, because I think there was some statistics released not so long ago by one of our governments. I'm not sure, so I don't want to quote. I don't want to say this as official quotations because they're not. But there is a huge amount of cyber attacks every day that they manage to block, because these, the Home Office, Ministry of Defense, I'm sure it's the same with the Pentagon in the US, are constantly being attacked.
Right.
Or at least
Probably is.
attempted, anyway.
Yeah, I would assume that the Pentagon would have probably some of the best security, or the best security in the world. So,
it's not easily hacked.
Yeah, definitely not easily hacked. And I honestly, I don't know of anyone who has attempted that. So I really couldn't really comment on it.
No, that's absolutely fine. It was just something that was sort of on my mind, and I had to get it out there. So yeah, I just want to now. I want to sort of talk about because there is the quite heavy stuff that you hear Anonymous around, but there are quite nice campaigns and operations that you hear Anonymous getting involved with as well. Like I'm sure I read something about like saving whales, and you went after one of the governments around whales.
Right. I remember reading that this week. That's, when it comes to anonymous operations, it's really amazing what you see. You see a really wide variety. You see online cyber attacks against governments. And then, if you go on AnonHQ, you'll see an article, I think this week or last week, about Operation Safe Winter. Operation Safe Winter has nothing to do with cyber anything. It's about providing food and clothing to the homeless at wintertime. So
yes,
you see, operations can take on a wide variety of causes.
Yeah, I read about one today myself. I can't remember what it was called. It might have been the Safe Winter one. There was an operation. It was basically just saying, do something nice for someone, buy them a cup of coffee, give someone a gift.
Yeah, and that's as far as the organization of operations, I can tell you this. OpSafe Winter, I think it was last year or the year before, a good friend of mine, because OpSafe Winter was going on around the world, he took it upon himself to conduct Operation Safe Winter where I am. And that's just an example of how anybody can go out and participate in an operation. You don't even have to know anybody, have any friends, nothing. An operation's going on. If it's something you're interested in, if it's something that you can take part in, anybody can.
Right. So really with operations, it's just if someone within this anonymous community has a certain passion, they can launch their own operation based on that passion.
Absolutely.
And that's, in a way, that's a great thing about it. It's, they're not, because with Anonymous, a lot we hear is very heavy stuff. It's saying, they're going after.
Well, there's a lot of misconceptions. I mean, people, every time you mention Anonymous, people either don't know what you're talking about, or they're like, oh, that hacker group. And that might have been true a decade ago. But Anonymous is not a hacker group anymore. We have evolved into something much more powerful than just a bunch of hackers.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure. So just hypothetically, this is potentially, again, quite a difficult question to answer, but say that we were beamed 10 years into the future. What would you like us to be talking about? Say we're 10 years in the future, we're talking about Anonymous again. What do you think Anonymous will be in 10 years?
Well, that's really hard to say. Look at people who were in Anonymous 10 years ago. Where are they today? Are they still involved? Is it still something that they are passionate about? It's hard to say. When you look at... So on an individual level, I think the people involved 10 years from now are going to be different people than people who are involved today. But as a whole, will Anonymous still be around? That's a good question, because I tend to believe that it will evolve into something else. And what will happen to the name Anonymous, I don't know. But I do hope that people who are getting involved with Anonymous now, who are participating in operations, who are writing articles, who are out there protesting, I really hope that they take what they're doing now and let that evolve them as an individual. And they take what they're doing now beyond Anonymous and make real change, instead of just going out and protesting, going out and taking part in government and changing things, going out and taking part of organizations that are trying to change things. So I hope that people who are involved with Anonymous now take what they're doing and grow it into something else down the line.
Wow, that's very interesting. Pardon me. Well, yeah, that's very interesting. And I'm pretty sure that, regardless, Anonymous, because of what it's become, will be around in one way or another, in any shape or form, because of how much it's grown. Something that's grown that much with that many people, it's hard to sort of have it disappear, really. Yeah,
and I mean, if you would have told the founders of Anonymous, 10, 12 years ago, that there would be a media wing that's got 4.5 million followers on Facebook and its own podcast, I think those guys would have laughed themselves to death. Seriously, I don't think they had any idea that it would have grown to where it is now. And I can say the same thing. I can't envision what it's going to be in 10 years, but I hope that it's something that doesn't have to slink around in the shadows. You know what I mean? Because that's the feeling that I get about Anonymous when I talk to people, is that it's some weird, mysterious thing that, exists in the dark web. And I want it to become something more.
Yeah.
Something greater,
Yeah. So would you like to see? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Would you like to see Anonymous maybe more accepted by governments, or would you completely disregard governments as, if you like, a friend of Anonymous?
That's a good question. I personally don't see that as being something that can't happen. But due to the compartmentalization and the anonymity, it's unlikely.
That's very true. And for now, that's my question.
And that's just to go along the lines of that question. That's kind of what I hoped for with my previous answer. If people move forward, taking the ideas, taking their beliefs, taking everything they're doing with Anonymous now, move forward, and those people move on to organizations that work with governments or anything like that, that's what I hope to see. So kind of contradictory, I know. It's kind of want to get Anonymous out of the shadows, but at the same time, not wanting it to go that far and allow individuals to progress beyond it.
So it could be gradual, these organisations, if more people who have been involved with Anonymous go on to work within government organisations, it could just be gradual, and it's not as I don't want to say like enemies, but you know what I mean? It's not as
right.
Yeah. I can't think of the word. Yeah.
I mean, realistically, a non-HQ, tomorrow we could just change our name to something else, and become a legitimate, recognized news organization, and then anybody can do that with any organization they have. You can have a lot of people in Anonymous have these little hacker groups they join or they're involved with, and then a hacker group just goes off and does its own thing separate from Anonymous. So...
Yeah, so like I mentioned like Lizard Squad a bit earlier on, so they could have easily spawned from Anonymous.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's another one, Vandasec. I don't know if they're UK based. I don't know where they are from, but they on Twitter do a lot of sharing of Anonymous, and it makes me think, have Vandasec spawned from Anonymous? Because it looks that way. They're not like. Because I don't know how it works with different hacking groups. Do they not like each other? Do they, happy to coexist? Pardon me.
Right, that's a question I honestly can't answer.
No.
I'm just not too knowledgeable on that topic to give you anything solid.
No, that's fine. But for that's fantastic. I've rattled through my questions. Is there anything else? Is there any message that you sort of would like to put out there, sort of on behalf of Anonymous? I know you don't want to say that you are the voice, but.
Right. Even though I do the Anonymous podcast, I try not to speak on behalf of Anonymous ever. Like I said, we can only really speak for ourselves as individuals within this banner of Anonymous. No, I really don't have a message to state other than if you're interested in change and if you're interested in making a difference and you're interested in Anonymous, then really what that comes down to is really determining what it is you want to do, and then you go do it. And it's that simple. When I got involved and started writing, I really didn't know what I was getting in for. And I'll tell you, not to really go back to why I got involved again, but I really just wanted to write one article. I was pissed off, and I wrote an article on the police state in America and submitted it. And that was it. I pretty much thought that was going to be it for me. And here we are almost 2 years later. And now we have a podcast, and the site's growing beyond any kind of anyone's expectations. When the Op ISIS hit stuff, we picked up 300,000 followers on Facebook in like 2 days. It was amazing.
Wow.
But if you want to get involved with Anonymous, it's really just about doing whatever you feel comfortable with. And that's pretty much it.
Right, and that's brilliant. And again, thanks very much for your time. That was great.
Hey, not a problem whatsoever. Anytime.